Hello again, everyone. In this video, we're going to be walking through Chapter 8 with the Mookie the Beagle Concierge Company. This chapter is going to focus on employees, contractors, and payroll transactions in QBO. Now, just to be clear, we're not actually going to be using the full payroll service in QBO because that's a separate subscription. It's not included with this free trial that we get as being a student. But we will be looking at how QBO lets us set up employee records, track hours, and connect that time to billing and invoicing. We'll also take a look at contractors. Contractors are different from employees because the business doesn't withhold taxes from them. Instead, they're paid directly and then tracked for 1099 reporting at year end. You'll see how QuickBooks makes it easy to flag someone as a contractor so those records are in place. Another important part of this chapter is time tracking. QBO has a feature that lets you track the hours worked either by employees or contractors. This is helpful not only for payroll, but also when you need to bill clients for time. In this walkthrough, we'll turn on the right preferences, make sure time entries can be marked as billable, and then practice entering time into the system. Finally, we'll touch briefly on the payroll options you'd see if your company subscribed to QBO Payroll. Things like paying employees, paying payroll liabilities, and filing payroll forms. Even though we won't be running payroll ourselves, it's important to understand how those features fit into the overall accounting system. By the end of this chapter, you'll understand how QBO handles employee and contract information, how time entries can feed into invoices, and how payroll liabilities and taxes are managed in the background. All right, let's get started. There are two main aspects to using QBO for employees and payroll transaction purposes. The first one's setting up the payroll, and the second, processing the payroll. Payroll setup requires setting up the employees list, turning on the time tracking preference, and then turning on QBO Payroll, which is a subscription service. We're not going to be doing that third piece of it. And then payroll processing consists of the four following main types of tasks: entering time. QBO permits us to track employee time worked to use in processing payroll and billing customers. It also involves paying employees. Select employees to pay, and then we can create their paychecks. It also involves paying the payroll taxes. We as a company will be liable for paying the payroll taxes to the various government agencies. Payroll tax liabilities include the federal income tax, state income taxes withheld, FICA, which is Social Security and Medicare, and unemployment taxes. And finally, we're going to talk about processing payroll forms. These forms include the Form W-2, W-3, Form 940, and Form 941 that must be submitted to various government agencies. So I'm logged into Mookie the Beagle here in my QuickBooks company file here. Make sure that you are as well. You can see the name up top on the left. And the first thing I'm going to do is mouse over my apps, and I'm going to mouse over team, and then I'm going to select employees. And what we're going to do right now is we're going to add the one employee of this company. So we're going to click add a new employee, and that's going to be Cy Walker. We don't have Cy's email address or his hire date right now, so we're just going to enter his name and click add employee. Now we can see Cy's information inside of our system. I noticed that when I first came to this screen that the edit button wasn't appearing next to employment details, so I went to the employee list by clicking on this link, and then I clicked back on his name, which brought me to the same page, and then the edit button appeared. So you might have the same experience, I don't know. So the Social Security number that's provided in the textbook for Cy Walker is not a valid Social Security number. It's all ones, and the QuickBooks system is now updated and it won't accept that invalid number. So I entered a random number that I just made up here for the Social Security number and got it to save, but at first it wouldn't save, so it looks like I needed to add another piece of contact information. So I also added a made-up phone number here. So I think if you add a phone number and then make up a Social Security number, you'll be able to save that information into the system. And now I can see the last four of the SOCH and the mobile number in there. You know, if it was a real employee and we had the QuickBooks Online payroll service, and you can see the payroll service, we don't have access to it. It's got this diamond next to it, which means it's a paid subscription service. So we're not going to be able to get in there and do the things that we would actually do. But when the employee is hired, they fill out a form called the W-4 form, and they provide information about the withholding that we're going to have to do. So like the filing status and so on. So we don't have the ability to put that information in for Sidewalker, but if we were really doing payroll through QBO and had subscription to the payroll service, we would need to set them up and have that information entered into the system. So the next thing we're going to do is take a look at how we can flag a couple of our contractors for tracking their payments for 1099 purposes. So to do that, I'm going to mouse over my apps. I'm going to go to the expenses and bills area, and then I'm going to select vendors. And the two contractors we're going to do this with are Andre LaFortune as well as Evan Henry. So I'm going to select Andre first. And now that I got Andre's vendor record open, I'm going to click the edit button. And here I'm going to scroll down the page a little bit, and I am going to check the box to track payments for the 1099 to Andre, and then I'm going to enter a social security number for the tax ID number. And now that I've done that, I'm going to save the vendor record. So now I'm going to go back to the vendor list. So I'm going to click on this link for vendors, and now I'm going to select the record of Evan Henry, and I'm going to edit his record to track his payments for 1099 purposes. So I'm going to click on the edit button again and basically do the same thing. Scroll down the page, check the box for track payments for 1099, and then I'm going to enter the social security number that's in the book for Evan Henry and save. So now that we set up those two vendors for 1099 tracking purposes, if you mouse over my apps and go to team and then select contractors, you're going to see those two vendors listed on this screen now. They weren't there previously. And if it was year end and it was time to prepare 1099s for these contractors, we can do that right here. We can prepare those 1099s. If we had already filed 1099s previously for payments to these contractors, we could view old filings here. And it says next to each of their names that they're W-9 ready. And what that means is that we have entered their tax ID number into our system. Typically when a business has these types of contractors, they'll ask that contractor to fill out a W-9 form, which indicates their tax name and their tax ID number on it, and we keep those on file. We just type some numbers in, so technically we didn't follow a very good process there, but that's normally what the business would do. We would also typically store the W-9 copy inside of QBO, so in case we ever needed to pull it up, we would be able to view it as well. If I click on any one of these contractors' names, you're going to see that I've got some details here with respect to their address and their tax ID number and so on. And if I click on these other tabs, I can see the payments that have been made to them during the year. In this case, it's actually filtering for all of them, but we could filter per year. And this is where we would see the W-9 information for Andre. So now we're going to practice a little time tracking within QBO. And time tracking within QBO permits us to track the amount of time worked. QBO uses time track to calculate employee paychecks, to calculate contractor payments, and to transfer time to sales invoices to bill customers for work performed. Work can be performed and time tracked by employees, contractors, or owners. The time tracking feature can be used to track time work by any of the three. How we record the payment, however, depends on the status of the employee who performs the work, employee, contractor, or business owner. So it's important that we determine the status of the individual performing the work. The status determines whether we record payments to the individual as a paycheck, as a vendor payment, or as an owner withdrawal. So if the person that did the work was considered a statutory employee, we would pay them through an employee paycheck. If they were a contractor, they would be paid through a vendor payment. And if the person was an owner of the business, well, that depends on how the business is organized. But if it's set up as a sole proprietorship, for example, it would be considered an owner withdrawal when we pay the owner. All right, so that being said, before we get started with the time tracking, we got to go into the settings of our company file and make a change here. So I'm going to go up to the gear icon and I'm going to select account and settings, and then I'm going to select the time tab over here on the left. And what I'm doing here is making sure that the first day of the work week is set up correctly. Per the book, it should be set up as Monday. I think I already changed mine. I think it was defaulting to Sunday. So you just select Monday and then save. And then these two entries were already set up on mine, so I didn't have to change them. Show service field and allow time to be billable should be both set to on. If they aren't, you can hit the pencil icon. You can flip those switches and save, but mine already were. So I am all set with these settings. I'm going to click done. So now that we have the time tracking settings set up there, we are about to practice making time entries, but before we do that, we're going to add one more contractor. So to do that, we're going to mouse over my apps. We're going to go to team, and then we are going to select contractors. And from here, we are going to click on add a contractor, and we have to name the contractor. It's going to be your name again, but if you use your name exactly the way that you did earlier in the class when you set yourself up as a customer, it's not going to work. So what you might do is maybe do your first initial and then your last name, and then you're not going to enter an email address, and you're going to want to uncheck that box, and you're going to add a contractor. And now when I go back to the contractors list, since we didn't enter a social number and it's saying the W-9 form is missing, so we don't have to do that for this, but I just wanted to point that out. All right, so now we are going to practice making some time entries. So to do that, we're going to mouse over create, and then in the team column, we're going to select time entry. And now we see the 3 contractors and the employee of the company. And we are going to make a little settings change here as well. So we just want to verify that all these contractors and the employee we can track their time. So I'm going to click on the gear icon and verify that. So choose who tracks time, and make sure that all of these buttons are checked and that show contractors is turned to on, and it is. So we're ready to rock and roll. I'm going to save the changes, even though I didn't really change anything, but make sure yours show as turned on for the 3 contractors and the employee, and if they weren't and you changed something, make sure to save changes. I'm going to close out of this pane, and now we're ready to go. So once again, we're going to mouse over create. In the team column, we're going to select time entry, and we're going to be entering time for your name. So find you in the list as a contractor, and then from this drop down that says this week, this is using my system, my computer system's calendar, and looking at the dates in August here. I'm going to change that to say custom, and then I'm going to enter the date the textbook tells us to do, which is January 15th. And now I am going to click on add work details. And if we had start and end times, we could turn the switch on. We could enter those beginning and end times, but we don't. We just have durations. So this is going to be entered as 1 hour. And the time that this contractor spent was specifically for a particular customer's pet. It was Joseph Asher's pet, which is named Cal. So we're going to select Joseph Asher first and then Cal. And then it was for a specific service. It was the errand service. So I'm going to select that, and it is going to be billable to that customer. So I'm going to flip that switch. And if we had notes about what the errand was, which is probably a good practice, we put them here, but we don't. So we're just going to click done. And now we're done with this time entry. So I'm going to click on this drop down arrow and save and close. So now that we've entered some billable time, we're going to see how that shows up on an invoice. So I'm going to mouse over create and select invoice in the customers list. From the customer drop down here, I am going to select the pet of Joseph Asher, which is Cal. The date of this invoice is January 15th. And as soon as I put that combination of project and invoice date in, this drawer opened up and it's showing that billable time that we entered a moment ago. So now that I see that, I'm going to click the add button. And what I'll notice when that happens is that service got brought over with the billable amount, and we're ready to rock and roll. So now at the bottom here, I'm going to click on this drop down arrow. I'm going to select save, which is going to give us the more actions button. I'm going to click on that, take a look at our transaction journal. Since this was an invoice, we should be seeing an increase to our accounts receivable to show that the customer owes us, and we should also see an increase in our income, our revenue, and that's what we see here in the journal entry. Because we are using the free QuickBooks Online Plus subscription that you get when you're a student, we don't have access to the QuickBooks Online payroll subscription, so we're not going to be able to create paychecks or really see what it looks like when we have to pay the payroll liabilities. But I am going to take a quick look at the information that we can see about the different payroll subscriptions. So if I mouse over my apps and find payroll, notice that has a diamond next to it, as does marketing. That tells us that these are paid portions and we don't have access to them. I'm going to click on that payroll. And if I scroll down the page a little bit, I can see the 3 different levels of payroll subscription that Intuit is currently offering. And I can see the cost per month. I can do free trials, but we're not going to do that, so that is going to impact what we do in this chapter, so we're not going to do that. And we can see the differences between the 3 different levels of service. Now, as for part of your discussion this week, I am going to have you research these at a little bit more detail. The full information's in the prompt in the discussion board, but you will be taking a look at these different levels of payroll subscriptions. If you were ever in a situation where you were advising clients about which version of QuickBooks as well as which version of QuickBooks payroll subscription to subscribe to, you would need to know the differences between them. So it's a good idea to take a look at that. Also, if you ever were to try to get your QuickBooks Online certification, the certification test does have some questions about the different levels of subscriptions. So you'll learn a little bit about that when you go through this week's discussion, because you have a little research component to that. I will say that setting up payroll is sort of a complex task to take on, but once it's set up, the Intuit system here is pretty smooth once it's running. So it's not too difficult to process the payroll, but it's a little bit difficult to set it up. Once payroll is set up, then we pay the employees on a regular basis, whatever the company's scheduled payroll date is. And QuickBooks will send you reminders when payroll should be done so that you can meet those deadlines and get your people paid. And when you pay them, you can print checks through the system or you can use direct deposit. Obviously, direct deposit has some advantages for both the company as well as the employee, and it is the most common way of paying employees these days. The textbook in section 8.8 gives us a screenshot of what a pay stub would look like. It shows the check at the top of it, and then it shows the details about how that net pay was calculated. So it'll show the gross pay, which is the pay before deductions. It'll show all the taxes and other deductions that were withheld from the paycheck, and then the difference between the gross pay and those taxes and those other deductions is referred to as the net pay, and that's the amount of the actual check. Sections 8.9 and 8.10 of our textbook talk about payroll liabilities. This payroll tax center that they're trying to get us to take a look at, we don't have access to this anymore. Intuit changed the way that this looks, and you have to have the subscription to get access to this payroll tax center. So we're not going to be able to take a look at it, but we really weren't doing much other than taking a look at it. Just realize that when you have employees, a company will incur liabilities for the amount of federal income tax that was withheld from the employee's paycheck. If the state has an income tax withheld, then that will be something that the company would have to pay back to the government, state government. Social Security and Medicare tax, which are referred to as FICA taxes, are something that the employer is on the hook for with the government. And finally, unemployment taxes. And if we go over to section 8.10 as well as 8.11, they talk about these different forms that employers have to file. It gives us a little bit of detail about what information is reported out on that form, as well as how often the form has to be filed. And you don't have to fill out any payroll tax forms in the class, although they do show us the form 941. We won't have to file any of these returns or anything like that. What I want you to be aware of here is the purpose, the general purpose of these 5 forms, as well as how often they're filed. And actually, some of the same information's in section 8.11. I'm going to flip to that. And the filing frequency is a little bit more clearly spelled out with this table down below. You can see which ones are filed quarterly versus annually and so on. So just read through this section. You'll see it appear in the Smart Book as well as the quiz, but you will not be responsible for filing any of these forms. So now we're ready to practice a little bit of what we did. So we're looking at Mookie exercises part 8 in our book. and it looks like we're going to be doing some time entries, and it looks like we're going to be doing a whole bunch of time entries, and then we're going to be doing some more time entries that are billable, and it looks like we'll do a little reporting and we'll invoice for some of the billable time, and finally we'll do a general ledger to sort of check our numbers at this point in the class. So I'll walk you through all of the Mookie the Beagle stuff, and I guess I'll start out with EM 8.1 and do these time entries. So to enter a time entry again, we mouse over create, and in the team column we select time entry, and we are doing time entry for Cy Walker. So we're going to select his name. In this drop down where it says this week, we're going to change that to custom, and then we're going to put the date that the text indicates, which is January 18th. And let's see, so for this one we want to make sure the 18th is selected, and it looks like this is a duration of 2 hours. I don't need to add the work details here because it's not a billable time and I don't have any other detail other than the duration, so I'm going to leave that as is. And then I'm going to click on the date of the 19th as well, and I'm going to put in the duration on the 19th at 2.5 hours. And now if you want, you can sort of click back and forth between these dates. You see the 2 hours you entered on the 18th and the 2.5 hours you entered on the 19th. And it looks like that's all I need to do right now, so I'm going to click on this drop down and I'm going to save and close. Alright, so now we're going to do another time entry with Cy Walker. So once again, mouse over create, find time entry in the team column, select Cy Walker from the list, change this drop down to say custom, and now we're going to enter the date of this first entry, which is January 21st. So on the 21st, he worked 2 hours. We don't have any other details, so we're not going to click on the add work details. And then I'm going to click on the date of the 22nd, and on that date Cy worked 3 hours, and on the 23rd it looks like another 3 hours, and on the 24th it was 8 hours, and that's it. So now once again I can toggle back and forth. I can also see those times up top here, and now I'm going to close out of this. So I'm going to click on this drop down and save and close. So now we're going to take a look at a report that's going to show those time entries that we just made for Cy. So to do that, we're going to mouse over reports, go standard reports. You can browse for your report, but if you know the name of it, you can just type it up here. We know the name. The book told us it's time activities by employee detail. So I just typed the word time and it filtered it out, and I see the one that I want, time activities by employee detail. Alright, so it's showing the current date here in the month of August when I'm making this video. That's not what I want to show right now though, so I want to change the dates here. The from and to are going to match the book. It says from the 18th of January to the 24th. So once I put those dates in, I see those time entries that we made for Cy. We should see a total of 20.3 hours. None of that time was billable, so there's no amount here. I did notice that we did not select a service when we set up those time entries, but it defaulted to the first service that was in that list. That's not going to matter with respect to any account balances, but if we were interested in what our employees were doing with their time, it might be misleading there. So I think that's just a flaw with the software. I didn't see to find a way around it. In fact, I found some forums where people were complaining about the same thing. So that's just something unfortunate right now, a little glitch in the system. Alright, so we're going to practice by making some more time entries now, but these time entries are going to be billable to customers. So to create a time entry, mouse over create, in the team column select time entry again, and this one is going to be for the contractor Evan Henry. And from the drop down I'm going to select custom, and then I'm going to enter the date that the book says to use, which is January 23. Alright, so these times are going to be billable, so for each of them I'm going to click on the add work details, and the duration of the first one is 1 hour. It is billable, so I find the customer that it's billable to, click their name, and then we have projects, which are the pets. It's billable related to the Bella pet. And then the service that was provided on the 23rd per the book is a short visit, and I want to flip the switch here to make it billable, and then I'll click done. So I've got that hour in on the 23rd. So I'm going to flip over to the 24th by selecting that, click on the work details because I got billable time again. The duration on the 24th is 2 hours. It's still for Carlos Hafra, and it's still for Bella. And then the service on the 24th was a medium visit. Select that, and then flip the switch for billable, and then click done. All right, so then on the 25th, we are going to click on add work details. The duration on the 25th is an hour. It's still working on Carlos Hafra's pet Bella. The service on the 25th is a short visit, and the time is billable, so I flip that switch and then click done. And then finally on the 26th, I click on add work details. The duration is an hour again. It's still with that same customer and same pet, Carlos Hafra and Bella. The service on the 26th is a short visit, and it is billable, so I flip that switch and click done. And now I'm done entering the information. I can verify that I have the 4 hours here between the 5 hours between the 4 different dates, and I can get out of the screen by clicking on the drop down and save and close. So I still have this time activities by employee detail reported. It looks like it's defaulted to the current month that I'm making this video in again. So I'm going to change this to show activity during January, and the text says to use January 18th through the 26th. And once that I had done that, I can see the time is being grouped by employees. So we have Cy Walker's time here, none of it billable, no dollar amount. And then Evan Henry's time, all of it billable, and we have the dollar amounts as well as the total. The text asks us to group first by employees, which it did by default, but if we want to change the grouping, we can click up here and we can group by different factors. So here it's set to group by employee. They also asked us to take a look at what happens if we group it by product and service. So if we do that, we can see that information is grouped by the service, short visit, and medium visit. And for medium visit, we can see there's a total of $200 that was billed for that. And then for the short visit, we see a total amount of $240. Now, it's a little bit misleading though, because we don't know that Cy Walker was doing short visits. His time wasn't billable, so it's not going to affect any account balances. But if we were doing some reporting where we were looking at what are people spending their time on, that might be a little misleading there. So that's just a flaw with the system, unfortunately. I look at these time entries individually. If I pull one up, again, I'll show it to you. It doesn't show any service. It says none. So you can see it's a sort of a glitch with the software there. All right, so we entered some billable time. So now we're going to invoice the customer for that billable time. So to do that, we mouse over create. In the customers column, we select invoice. The customer here is going to be Carlos Hafra, related to his pet Bella. So I find Bella in the list and select it. The date of this invoice is going to be January 29th, so I'm going to change that. And then as soon as I selected Carlos Hafra, I had this drawer open up where it shows all these billable items, and most of it's the billable time that we just entered, but there is one billable expense, and this is something that we entered much earlier in the class. Several chapters ago we entered this, so this one should show up. We're going to add all of these. We could add them individually, or we can just hit this add all button. That's what I'm going to do right now, and they all populated on the invoice. And now that we've done that, we are going to save the transaction and then take a look at the journal entry. So now that I've saved that transaction, more actions appear. Click on that and then transaction journal. Since we recorded an invoice, we know that our accounts receivable is going to increase and our income is going to increase. And that's what we see here. We see a debit, which is an increase to our asset account, accounts receivable, and we see a credit to our different revenue accounts. We see some of it going to the billable expense income from that earlier transaction that we recorded, and then for the time entries, it was hitting the 4,200 sales account. So that makes sense with respect to tying it to our prior accounting knowledge of debits and credits. So one last thing for Mookie the Beagle in Chapter 8, we're going to run the custom report that we saved earlier. This is the general ledger report. And once we pull that up, we can see it here, general ledger, all dates. Make sure that if you didn't save this report in an earlier video, you can just run a simple general ledger report, and then just at the top here, change your dates to all dates and then hit run report. And the reason why I do that is because later in the class, we're going to run some financials that require us to look at a period of time. So the dates that were used matter. So I want to make sure that we don't see any dates in this list. I'm just looking at the date column only and see if there are any dates that were entered outside of January. If I see any, I can just click on the transaction. I go in there and correct the date. I'd find the correct date in the book and fix it. Because if you do an income statement, for example, for the month of January, but you put a transaction in August, it's not going to show up in the January income statement. So you want to make sure your dates are correct for certain reports. And now on the screen, what I'd like to do is spend a little bit of time and just look at these balances of these accounts and make sure that they're matching up. So once again, the balances are at the bottom in bold. Total for the checking account, the balance is here, and then the activity that got to that balance is listed above. So check your figures against this, and if it doesn't match, pause the video and look at these details and try to figure out why. So everything's looking good on my end comparing to the answer key. I don't see any issues at all so far. Looks perfect. Alright, so that's it for Chapter 8 with respect to Mookie the Beagle. Now it's your turn to get into your Hafra Cyber Company. Once again, click on the gear icon, switch company, and pull up Hafra's records. And make sure you always double check the company name up top. If there's anything that I can help with respect to finding errors or answering any questions at all that you have about the course, just let me know.